When you smile, the whole world smiles too. When you're glad I'm happy for you, don't be sad, it's over far too soon. When I'm feeling cold and tired, music lifts my spirit higher. Come with me, we'll sing a brand new tune. Don't you sweat the little things. You're waiting for the phone to ring. It's a silly thing. When the world has knocked you over, look and you'll find a four-leaf clover. Get that up, you know it's up to you. Think of what tomorrow brings. Flying high on eagle's wings. It's a silly thing. Lift your head and let the sun in. Take a look, the tide is turning. Come with me, we'll sing a brand new tune. Come with me, we'll sing a brand new tune. Come with me, we'll sing a brand new tune. Come with me, we'll sing a brand new tune. Come with me, we'll sing a brand new tune. Come with me, we'll sing a
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
Isabel, you're here.
Yes, I am.
Well, welcome everybody to today's Happy Life Huddle. I'm so excited to have Jacob Peterson on and Isabel Avila. Isabel, coincidentally, we have the same last name. What a coincidence.
Yeah, sorry, coincidence.
I'll introduce you both in a second, but just for everyone out there, this is the Happy Life Huddle. It's a live stream conversation with myself, Juan Carlos Avila. I'm CEO and founder of HappiLyfe, and a discussion around all things balance, confidence, connectedness, positive change, just taking 15 to 20 minutes to learn, share, and reflect. And HappiLyfe itself is a purposeful living app that empowers people to lead happier lives by facilitating balance through daily focus and access to wellness tools, connectedness through a safe and supportive community, and positive change through daily reflection and accountability. And it's available to download for free in the App Store and the Google Play Store. So today we have Jacob Peterson, who many of you may have met before, who is a HappiLyfe ambassador working with HappiLyfe this semester, and Isabel Avila, HappiLyfe ambassador, jumping on the call for the first time. Isabel, do you want to introduce yourself to the folks out there?
Yeah, okay. So my name's Isabel. I'm a sophomore at the University of Missouri. Sorry, right now. I'm in a sorority. I'm a business major. I happen to be Juan's daughter, so It's a little fun fact, but
Right.
yeah, that's pretty much all there is.
Don't worry, it's not a big reveal. We're not on the Maury Povich show or anything like. Well, that's really old. You guys wouldn't even know that show. So, but actually today happens to be World Teen Mental Wellness Day, right? So we're on this call today. And Isabel, you're still a teenager, right?
That I am. Yeah, for a couple months. I have a couple months left. So
Jacob, you're no longer a teenager.
No, I'm 22, so past my prime.
That's right. We're not going to kick you out. You get to stay on. You get to stay on the call today. But our call today was really to talk about social media and its impact on teens. There was an article that Jacob and I had stumbled across, a recent article around that, and we titled it "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." And then so we wanted to have someone who's a teenager just coming out of those teen years kind of help us talk about this. And it just so happened that the call landed today on World Teen Mental Wellness Day. And it's really World Teen Mental Wellness Day is set up to really bring to light issues surrounding emotional and mental wellness for teens, right?
Yeah.
There was a Pew Research piece that came out recently that I think we had done a little blurb on, where it talked about how for parents right now, their number one concern for their kids is now mental health, where it used to be, 5-10 years ago, more around bullying and teen pregnancy and, maybe drugs and alcohol and things like that. Mental health, has kind of risen to the top across the globe. So that kind of speaks to, what we're looking at. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention just around this is before you kind of jump into things, is that about a year ago, at the end of this month, the CDC released a report on U.S. teens, and what they came out and said that the stats were showing is that 44% of U.S. teens are feeling persistently sad or hopeless, and 1 in 5 U.S. teens has contemplated suicide. So there's a lot of factors around this, right? Given COVID and kind of what we all went through, but that also kind of blew up what we saw in regards to social media. So just with all that being said, I guess, Isabel, maybe it'd be nice to hear about your, because it's really you and Jacob, your generation and your introduction to social media and your relationship with social media. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I mean, when I started doing this, I was doing some thinking about it, because obviously, like you were saying, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are the pros and the cons to this whole thing. And I think that we're at a point where we're very aware of the way that it's negatively affecting people. I mean, it's a discussion that I think I've had it through high school, with teachers and stuff, and I've had from my parents about this whole thing. And I feel like these articles and these sorts of research studies are pretty common at this point. But I really think it kind of, it's on a case-by-case basis, with individuals, based off of the way that they value and the way that they're able to sort of not implement, but how they use those pros of social media and those cons and how it impacts them. Because I would say I 100% have experienced the negatives of social media, and I'm very well aware of those effects, but there are also parts of it that I feel I couldn't give up. And I personally think that it's I don't want to say worth it, but I enjoy certain parts of it enough that I'm willing to overlook the negative. So I think it kind of depends on that. But another thing that I was thinking of is the stuff that I enjoy about social media, the way that I feel it makes me feel connected, and it allows me to share things with my friends and talk about things in a way that makes me more comfortable than doing it in person, because that's very not confrontational, because I'm not saying necessarily in a negative way, but just sharing things that might be somewhat heavy or going on in your life. It's a lot easier to use it as a medium. Personally, I find it's easier to use that as a medium to share things when you're able to kind of put up sort of guards, and it's not so direct. So I think that really helps me, because I'm able to share a lot with my friends that I don't think I would otherwise. But the other thing is, I was thinking about this, and I was wondering, is this a solution to a problem that's created by social media? So is like, yes, I find that this helps me, but is the only reason that I seem like I feel like I'm being very vague in the way that I'm speaking, but like the only reason I like find this enjoyment is because social media has already created the issue that makes me feel like I can't be direct about these things. And so now I feel like, oh, I have a safe, not a safe way, but a way to like
Right.
talk about things, and it's like indirect and it's like lighter and it's easier for me
Yeah.
to connect. But yeah, that's just kind of like like something I was thinking about,
Yeah,
whether
that's your opening statement. I like that. You're like, you're swaying the jury already. I love it. It's well, what I would say, there's a lot to unpack there, right? And just like I wrote a couple of notes down, and I think the first thing was like you talked about, like you've had this discussion around social media and its impact with teachers and parents, but you didn't mention like peers, right? So like you and your peers ever, like, do you guys talk about it, or is it sort of like, no, this is our platform, so our teachers and parents are going to bring it up and talk about like how concerned they are, but do you guys as the kind of like with your peers, like acknowledge it? So that's the first thing. The second one is, it's really interesting how you talk about a solution to a problem and sort of being able to connect and share that way. So I think the community piece is hugely important, right? Because it's that ability to connect. And we'll talk again about the flip side, the negative side of that. But, I hadn't even thought about this as like a way for you to share, in a way that's possibly safe versus, when you're in person and you might have that fear of rejection or made fun of, or, because you're sharing something and it's kind of safer that way. So, yeah, I don't know if you wanted to kind of comment on either of that.
Yeah. So sorry, could you repeat the first
Yeah,
one?
the one
I
was
did
more
have
just
something.
like to teachers and parents, and then versus like talking about it with your peers.
Okay.
Do you guys?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it's not like me and my friends are all sitting around in a circle being like, man, like social media. But there's definitely just like you see things on social media about the negative. So like you see things on TikTok all the time about how like that stuff that people post is unrealistic, and people use, it's kind of like interesting how people use the same platforms that like they're speaking, not, I don't want to say speaking negatively about, because it's not like there's like a vendetta against like a certain like platform, but it's like we're using these platforms at like as we're also acknowledging the sort of negatives of these platforms.
Right.
So like people will post on Instagram like stuff about like Instagram versus reality, or and it's certain sorts of like social media creators who kind of like use their platform to speak about these things. So like I don't want to say like my peers, like me and like my friends, but it is within like teens on the platform. There is like some sort of discourse about this sort of stuff.
And I think it's you hit upon a couple of like the positives, right, of the platform, which is also there are positive communities within these platforms, right, where you can look at nutrition or physical health, or cooking or art or music, or so there's and there is also the ability to build community around this, but also to learn, right? There's definitely a big learning component around the platform, where you may not have had access to some of these skills or other ways, right? Because they don't teach it at your school, or you wouldn't have access to it, right? So I think that's really important, is sort of the community component, and then obviously the learning component. But I think as a parent, a lot of times, the sort of the feeling is without even getting into the really bad stuff, is sort of like, God, my kid's missing out on the real world, like what's going on around them, right? Because if they're down like this, they're not present, and they're not looking at, the world that they're in and experiencing that. So, so what are your comments to that? Like,
I mean, I think that is pretty valid. I mean, a lot of us, especially like during COVID, when it was just everything was very like weird, and now we're kind of used to that. So, I mean, you could talk forever about how that sort of like threw everything off. But just the way that we're very used to just like being on our phones, and you kind of have to actively want to experience the real world in order to pull yourself away from it. So it's kind of like you have to take the initiative for it. That
because it's a kind of like, how do you stay present in the real world while still staying connected?
Because if you're content in this like online space where it's just like you and your phone and your devices and stuff. It's very comfortable. So you have to, again, just actively want to take that step and like separate yourself from that. And like, it has to be like individually driven, and you have to like consciously want to change that because it is comfortable and it does feel safe because, I mean, it's just like what we're used to at this point, and it's very easy, and it's very easy to also like slip into that.
Right. Well, so let's get into some of, and I think we've kind of touched upon like some of the bad, right? We talked about some of the good, like some of the bad. And I think COVID possibly like, really exacerbated this, right? Where sort of like usage is kind of going like this. And then all of a sudden you get your generation, right? You're in high school, middle school, and then you're locked away at home and you're not having social interaction. And then this is like your lifeline. So there's the good part of it where you were able to kind of stay connected to people, your peers that you were and your friends, right? And have some of that social interaction, even though it was different, but at the same time, it sort of took you down this rabbit hole, right? So, and maybe, from both of you, and we'll start with you, Isabel, just like, you're like, what was that like? Was it a lifeline? Was it kind of a rabbit hole? Was it a combination of the two? And then also I know it impacted your sleep for sure, but I don't know if you want to kind of comment on those things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it was a combination of both for sure. Just because I think individually, the way that your mental health was before COVID, also, I think it sort of like magnified that. So depending on who you were, like it could have just been a great way to connect. Like there are some people that I speak to, like my peers, who were like, yeah, no, like it was great. Like I had a blast. Like I would go over to like one of my friend's house and we did like our online school together and then we hung out and like whatever. I had like a very different experience. And I think like I used it in both ways because there were definitely ways in which like COVID made me excessively use like social media platforms and I was always on my phone and it had negative impacts. But I also think that because like given my situation, without it, I would have felt like so incredibly isolated. So it was sort of like despite those negative sort of effects of it, it definitely was something that just like made me feel like I was connected to the outside world because I mean, I have two younger sisters. I wasn't able to see them for how many months. It was just me and my mom. And we were like really strict with like the COVID guidelines and everything. So I was like incredibly disconnected. I want to say after like coming to school here and like meeting people and hearing about their experiences, I was more disconnected than I would say the majority of people. And although like parts of like me being on social media during that time period did have negative outcomes, I just can't like imagine how much more isolated I would have felt without like not even just like speaking to my friends, but just having some sort of like distraction, just having something to sort of like take away and like not necessarily give my brain a break, but more so to just kind of like escape from the outside world. Especially during that time period, I would say I definitely used it as a way to like escape from what was going on around me.
Sure.
And I don't want to say like that's like just what social media is because I wouldn't say I use it like that at all now. Like even just like the context of the time and just like how I was doing personally, that's just what it ended up being.
Yeah. That's really amazing. And I know there was just so much going on, and for everyone it was different, right? As you mentioned. Jacob, for you, what was your experience like through COVID and then your relationship with social media during that time frame?
Yeah, definitely. It kind of what Isabel said, it's kind of like a negative and like a positive thing both at the same time, because it's like you're using social media to make those connections when you can't, see them in person. But at the same time, it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like you're actually there. And I think it was especially weird, like when COVID kind of wrapped up a little bit and then I started seeing my friends again, I kind of forgot how to act like socially almost. Like it just felt like, because on a phone, like you can really rationalize and like think out your thoughts about what you want to say before you say it. And then I just get back in person and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so awkward. Like, how do I even like interact with people? Like, it's so weird. But I definitely found it as a way to, like Isabel said, like kind of escape like what was going on. I definitely found myself using social media a lot more, and I found myself posting a lot more. So like on my stories, I would always like talk about a lot of things, whereas I feel like now like I'm definitely more like connected with my friends like in person, as I'm now like back in school, and I don't find myself posting as much, and I find my screen time to be like way more like down. But yeah, it was definitely just a very strange time for everybody. And it just definitely felt very disconnected. And it felt like, you know, companies use all these algorithms these days too. And it just felt like I was being pushed a lot more with products that like I just didn't want. And like I just got overwhelmed by all this information. And it was just very confusing, and I wasn't really sure like what to think about it. It was just
I think it's really interesting, Jacob. You talk about like interacting with people, and then because you're interacting with them through social media a certain way, and then you know, having lost that social interaction face to face, then you know, trying to relearn those skills, or then not potentially having developed those skills that you would normally have developed while you know would have been in school together. And then you're kind of seeing now where there's a challenge in corporate America when people are going out into the workforce, where you know they're wanting to work remotely, but then there's a lack of mentorship. There's a lack of a path for ascendancy within the organization, because you're not having those relationships, you know, at work, right, and then in life. So it's kind of, you know, relearning those skills or adapting those skills, and then how well you're doing with that. So let me just real quickly go down kind of, you know, because the article we read talked about like some of the bad before we get into the ugly, right? And if there's any of these that you want to kind of like talk about, but sort of like the idea of the wrong kind of interaction, like the focus on likes and followers, right? So loneliness, like, you know, being on social media could actually make you feel lonelier because other people are doing things, and like even like that idea of like comparing yourself to others, right? And the you know, people are posting their best life, right, or their supposed best life, which may not even be a real life. The idea of like it becoming a craving or an addiction, right, being on social media. And then finally, and I mentioned this before, sleep, right, which is like one of those things where when we talk about wellness at HappiLyfe, we also need to think about not just your mental emotional wellness, but the other things that impact it, such as, you know, alcohol and drugs and sleep, right? If you're not, and nutrition, right? If you're not getting, if you're not healthy in those areas, it's going to impact your happiness and wellness. So out of those things like sleep or addiction or comparing yourself to others, you know, likes and followers, any of those that really you kind of saw like, yeah, I struggled with this, or, you know, I want to share something about this topic.
I mean, I'd say on like the aspect of like addiction with that, there's kind of like two veins that it has. So I think part of it is just like, even if you are not posting on social media, it's an addictive sort of like medium. Like you go on there and you're just overstimulated with different types of content. And that's like, I saw in the article, there was like one like heading that was like, sleep is more important than likes. And I was like, well, a lot of time when people are like losing sleep, they're not like up, like counting likes, like refreshing. It's because it's just so distracting. You keep on like going through content. Like I'm thinking of TikTok. It's like, for the most part, those videos are like 15 seconds. And you just swipe through and you're getting all sorts of like different content in such a short span of time.
Right.
And through that, like, it just keeps on coming. There's no end to it.
Right.
And so that's sort of like where I think people are like losing sleep by getting distracted by those types of things. And that's definitely like an addictive part of it.
Right.
And then the other aspect of that is like the addiction in terms of like, if you are posting and getting likes, like I've posted on TikTok and I've had videos that have gotten like
10 likes.
Yeah, just about. I've had videos that have gone like somewhat like viral. Like I've had like people be like, I've had someone say like, I'm pretty sure I saw this TikTok video of yours. Like, so I'm not like I have like strangers coming up to me in the streets or anything,
Right,
but like friends I have. But it's like when you have that, it's very validating, especially on a platform when like something that I've posted like that, I posted like a prom dress or something, and that's validating because it's like, oh, like I look good, I'm getting a bunch of likes. And
right.
then when those are pretty rare instances for like a normal person to have, and so it's a very, like, I don't want to say like euphoric, but like it's very like good feeling, and it's very
Right, there's
validating.
adrenaline and there's a
Yeah, for
validation
sure.
component.
And like you do like refresh those things, and it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting followers now, and like it's very validating. And something else like I've done is I've posted something that it was like funny, and then so getting a bunch of likes from that, it's like, okay, like my personality, like my humor, like that's very validating. But then you post again and it doesn't happen, and it's like, oh, so then you want to keep on posting more because
Right,
you want to hit that again. You want to
right.
get like those numbers, you want to get the
Well,
likes, you want to
and
get
the
that.
question is like, is that healthy, right? Because it's
Yeah.
sort of like this reward, like we're going to give you this little reward
Yeah.
now, and then we're gonna take it away, and but
Mhm.
and then how that, how you navigate that as
Yeah.
developing teen or developing young adult to say like, well, what does this mean to me, and
Uh-huh.
why am I placing so much value on it, right? Kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And I think it partially also, I mean, this is just like I've seen like on these platforms, like I've seen creators say like TikTok will promote like a video of yours and you'll get a bunch of likes because they're showing it to a lot of people. They show it to more people. I don't know how their algorithm works, but it gets shown to more people and then it gets more likes. The more likes it gets, it kind of like accumulates from there. It builds up. And then after that, the next few videos you post, they're not going to promote it at all because they're aware of this sort of like
Right,
addictive thing, and it's going to keep you on the app more. This is not like confirmed, but I've just like seen people talk about like this
right,
as like hypothetically, and I just think like as an idea, that's really interesting for the platform to be aware of the way that this sort of addiction works and
right.
using that to like get people to just keep on posting and keep on interacting and keep on like creating content, and it works out beneficially for them, and they're kind of exploiting this the
Right.
way that it affects us.
So we just have a couple minutes left, but I do want to mention, because like I know you didn't talk about it, even though I've kind of brought it up a couple of times, which is like your sleep patterns definitely were impacted during COVID and partially through social media, and it's likely that some of those patterns like continued on post COVID, right, in terms of sleep and kind of impacted that. So have you been able to kind of not control that, but just sort of like adapt to that, to like where you're like, oh, I'm kind of improving my sleep patterns now, and I like I understand my relationship with social media and where that may impact it.
I mean, I feel like the sleep thing, I don't know. I'm not very aware of it. I think it's just like in general, everyone has like issues with like, I guess in my generation. So I guess this kind of says something about that. But being up on your phone and like not going to sleep. And again, it's sort of one of those things as like in high school, I wasn't being as aware or conscious as to like stop myself at a certain time and be like, okay, like I'm going to turn off my phone and go to sleep.
Right.
It was a lot
Like
harder
the
to do
idea of
that.
the 1 hour no screen time before bed, I think
No.
most people aren't able to do that.
No.
It's
Yeah,
kind of like
no.
you have screen time until you pass out or until you put your phone away.
Yeah, for sure. And I see even me like putting my phone down at like an earlier hour than I would before as like a sign of maturity and like
Sure.
responsibility. Like,
Right.
but I didn't even think about like the 1 hour. I mean, I know that's a thing, but
Right.
that's not even something that I think about. I'm just
Right.
glad that I'm putting my phone down before 1 in the morning,
Right.
to go to sleep. So I think that's honestly one of those things that will just happen to come with maturity as you get older. Um, I mean, it's hard to say just because other generations haven't had that, so you don't really know. But I feel like as I've gotten older, and the same thing with my friends, like you just value those things more. Your sleep kind of like feels a lot more important. Um, and so I think
Because our generation was just
it gets a
working.
little bit better. And I think slowly like you feel the desire to prioritize your sleep over social media.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think slowly you like you feel the desire to prioritize your sleep over social media. Um, but I think slowly you like you feel the desire to prioritize your sleep over social media. Um, but I think slowly you like you feel the desire to prioritize your sleep over social media. Um, but I think slowly you like you feel the desire to prioritize your sleep over social media. Um, But yeah, sorry.
Okay. That's all right. I was going to make a dumb dad joke because I could actually make a dad joke with you, right? Because of our relationship. But anyway, so let's talk about the ugly real quick as we're kind of wrapping up. And maybe, Jacob, if there's anything you want to jump in on this
Sure.
component. But the article talked about like bad behavior looking good, potentially looking good, right? Like, so people doing things that are bad and then kind of being like, oh, that looks fun, or that's funny, and so I'm going to do this behavior, mimic the behavior, and then get hurt or hurt someone else. Or even psychologically disordered behavior looking good, like if someone's like cutting themselves or whatever, things like that. And then the big one, which is like the bullying component. So and just any kind of thoughts on that, or like, is that kind of overblown, or does it actually, do those things like happen? Jacob, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very real issue on social media. That's for sure. I see a lot of influencers doing things for attention. Like, one comes to mind. There was this one video I saw. There's like this steep hill in California, and this person was like racing their Tesla, and they like sped over and was like throwing sparks everywhere, and it was like crazy. And then they like crashed into somebody else's car, and then it got like millions and millions of views and like really like negative attention, but like they're getting validation because they were getting like 1 million likes. Mm-hmm. And then the guy posted like a follow-up video and like started to GoFundMe, and then he got his car like paid for and more. So I mean there's still some good things that can happen, like those connections there, but definitely bad behavior can get rewarded. And I see a lot of like on YouTube, for example, there's people that do like these things called mukbangs, or like eating shows, and they'll like eat large amounts of like food that are like unhealthy, and do like really, let's just say, like same right? things, all for attention. Yeah.
And they have on the bullying side, is it like, have you seen it happen, and is it is it something that like like at what point do you say something, do you step up, or does it like or like how does because it's a whole nother way for people to interact positively or negatively, right? So I mean, the bullying happens in school in person, right? That but it also happens virtually. So.
Yeah, I think the main thing with that is the algorithm brings similar people to the same place. So if you go in a comment section, they're either all negative or all positive, and there's like no in between. Like it's just the way the algorithm works, and it shows you information that you want to see and what other people who think similarly like you want to see. So it's all brought together all in one place. So it kind of just gets lost in the sea of like the algorithm, and it's just hard to like siphon out the good from the bad sometimes, because the algorithm just brings similar people all into one place. So it's
Isabel, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Like I feel like there have been like videos or something that I've seen, and I'm like, I see a video and I was like, oh, like these comments are not going to be good. And I look and it's just they're all good comments. I was like, okay. I mean, I'm not going to comment at anything. I'm not going to like cyberbully someone, but I was just not expecting that. And then other times it's just going to be like all the comments are negative. And so it kind of very much about how it brings like the same people to the same types of videos. So I feel like there's like the room for different like and like niche communities. And that's why like I'll see a video that like it's on my like For You page, and I see it and it's not like my typical type of content. It's not like my sort of community. And that's why I'm just like a little surprised. And sometimes the reason those videos are on is because they've sort of got that like negative attention in the comments. But people see it more so as like funny.
Yeah.
So it's like,
but sometimes funny to one person, right? Because there's that sort of like,
for sure. And I think though it makes it a lot easier because it's like thousands of people who have like all liked this video and they all see it and they're all sort of like making fun of it. And it doesn't seem like it's a real person. It's just like, oh, everyone thinks this is funny. Right. And it's really interesting the way that works out, because it's not so much like cyberbullying, like, oh, like some I mean, this does exist, but what like comes to mind with like that sort of thing is not like, oh, like some girl that you know, like making a mean like video about you or something like that. It's not so much personal. It's more so like it's really more so like strangers, I feel.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of like the lesson there is like there's the opportunity to practice compassion, empathy, and kindness, like in our daily lives, but also when we're on social media. So we're going to wrap up here. Isabel, thank you so much for joining us. Jacob and I are going to talk afterwards and decide whether, you know, we'll have you back or not. Like we'll have that discussion. But you know, anything, Isabel, that you want to say to us or specifically me, your dad today?
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say it's really interesting. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this right,
So
but it's really
you're not going to wish
interesting
me you're not going to wish me happy birthday then?
okay, but you're not letting me phrase it. I was gonna say it's interesting you're doing something about teens when today, especially, you're so far from it.
I'm actually a
Happy birthday.
teen, a preteen, a teen at heart.
Yeah.
But Isabel, I love you so much. Thank you so much for being on. You know, and we like to end the show by just saying like our motto at HappiLyfe, which is to always remember the most selfless thing that you can do is to work on yourself. So bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye Isabel. Bye Jacob.
Bye.